The basic strokes of calligraphy are the individual strokes that you get when you break apart the lowercase letters into their most fundamental pieces. So in this video, we're going to talk about what the strokes are. I'll show you what they look like in the context of letters and a word. And then we'll also talk about the history and where they came from. So I'm going to write a word here, and as I write it, try to identify these strokes as I go. And we'll do that together after I write the word, but just see if you can spot any of them as I go. So right now I'm using a small brush pen, and the way that this tool works is as I press with light pressure on the pen, I get a thin stroke, and as I press with heavier pressure, I get a thicker stroke. And the secret is all of your downstrokes coming towards you are thick, and all of your upstrokes going away from you are thin. So you use light pressure going away from you and heavier pressure coming towards you. So you'll notice I'm lifting my pen a lot. Even though it looks like the letters are connected, calligraphy is not the same as cursive where you keep your pen on the page. Calligraphy requires lots of pen lifts, and those pen lifts coincide with our basic strokes. I'm writing on guide sheets that have lines on them. You may notice a faint diagonal line running down the page. That is called our slant line, and that line helps us keep our strokes consistent. All of the downstrokes follow that line and should be parallel to it. We're going to go one by one and find these strokes within our word. So let's start, we're going to skip the first one. We'll come back to that. Let's start with this one. So this is called an underturn. And an underturn starts with heavy pressure coming down, curves at the bottom, and then finishes off with a light pressure thin stroke. So we can find this stroke right here in the A. Right here. You'll notice as we go there are some slight variations to these strokes. For example, this one ends halfway up that thin line. So that is your underturn. The next one is called an overturn. It's the same as this except upside down. So we start at the bottom at the baseline with thin, light pressure, curve around at the top, and head back down with thick pressure or heavy pressure to create a thick line. So the overturn is found, here's an example at the beginning of your N, here and here. Oh, I just realized I forgot this underturn in the I. I'm sure many of you already spotted that. Okay, the next one is called an oval. This is a tricky one. There's a lot going on with it, but you draw in this direction, counterclockwise. And this one's pretty easy to spot. We have an example in the A's, in the G, and then we also have a partial oval in the C. This next stroke is called a compound curve. And you can kind of think of it as the start of an overturn and the end of an underturn. And you'll find this right here in the N. Like that. Okay, the next one is what we call a reverse oval. So this actually starts with a straight line, but then comes up, around, and it's going in the opposite direction as your regular oval. So it comes around this way. And you can find this one in the B right here. Next up is the ascending stem loop, which looks like this. This one starts at your header line, comes up, around, and down, and this one's pretty easy to spot in letters like B and L, although this one does curve at the bottom. Then we have our descending loop, which this one starts at the top of your X height or at your header line, comes down below the baseline, curves around and loops back in, and you can find this in letters with loops like G. All right, let's go to the one that we skipped, which is the entrance stroke. This is just a thin curved line. You'll find it at the beginning of your letters, entrance stroke, as well as the end, so it's also called an exit stroke. And then we'll find it in some of these connecting spots right here, like going at the end of the B into the A, going into the A here, into the I, and there we go. And then, of course, we have the dot of the I. So there are a few strokes that show up in letters like dots of I's, crossbars of T's, other parts of letters like lowercase r that have special strokes that don't fit perfectly into these 8 strokes. And we'll actually talk more about that soon when we go over the history of the basic strokes. But this is why we use basic strokes. So again, they are the fundamental pieces of the letters. So when you break down the lowercase letters, you get these strokes. And the reason that we use them is, well, there's a couple reasons. A big one is for consistency. So as you create this descending loop, for example, everywhere you have it on your page in every letter, like in the lowercase y, lowercase j, g, if you make the exact same stroke here, then your letters will look very consistent and very beautiful. And then we also use these as points of where we lift our pen. So here we identified the strokes as the individual pieces of the letters already written, but another approach you can use to look at it is to take your strokes, and let's do the letter B, and you can combine them together. So for the B, we have an entrance stroke plus an ascending stem loop, or ascending loop, plus the reverse oval, and then finally our entrance / exit stroke. So when you put those all together, I'll just use one color for this, and you put them next to each other, you'll get your letters. And so this is how we teach them, is we first in our course, we teach you the basic strokes, and then we teach you how to combine them together to create your letters. All right, so let's move into where these strokes came from. The basic strokes that Jillian showed you are what most modern calligraphers use today, including the names and the number of strokes. You might find that some people use a different number of strokes, and we're actually going to look at some historical examples. Now, if you're anything like us, you might be curious about the history of calligraphy. We always wondered, where did these basic strokes come from? And so we did our own research and found lots of different historical references. We're just going to quickly look at them and see some interesting things going all the way back to 1813. And if you want to learn more about this, then we will include all of the links to these resources in the description. So the first one is from 1813, and this is a book called The Art of Writing. And here you can see on this page that the principal strokes right here, there are 6 of them. So only 6 are used here. And I thought it was interesting that these are named, like this first one is called direct L, inverted L, and curved L. And then this, what we call the descending loop, is called the J. What we call the oval is just the O, and then a stem. Now here I thought it was interesting too, that there was no ascending loop. They have the descending loop for the J, but then I was looking at the next couple pages where the letters are formed, and the letters where we usually use the ascending loop, like, let's see if we can find one, like H, instead they're just using a straight stem here. So here you can see all of these strokes are numbered. If we go back to that first page that had them listed, they're numbered here, so 1 through 6, and these are used when explaining how to form the letters here. So this is a combination of 2 and 3. This is something that we have seen commonly in these historical references, is just numbering the strokes rather than always referring to them as their name. In the next source, this is from the Huntington's Art of Penmanship, and this was in 1821. You can see here now there are 12 strokes listed out here instead of just the 6 that were used in the previous example. And we have some more variations, for example, the upper loop over here, the ascending loop, and then some very letter specific strokes. Like this is only used in the letter Z, and some of them you can kind of tell where they come from, like the letter K. Again, these are numbered. As I was reading through this one, in the description up here, this is a lot of pages. If you want to look at this yourself, you're welcome to check it out. All of the strokes here are explained in words first. So there's a lot of reading that you can go through and read about how these strokes are formed before they even give you the diagram of what it's supposed to look like. And that was also a common feature of some of these books, is that there's a lot of written instruction here that explains in words how the letters are formed rather than in diagrams. Also, something interesting about this particular resource is that this is the only place where we could find the word fundamental strokes being used. And so here it was on this page right here, the fundamental strokes or principles of the art. That's the only place we could find the word fundamental strokes in any of these historical documents. In the other ones, or in most of them, they're called either the principles or the parts of the letter. But these days we usually refer to them as the basic strokes or the fundamental strokes, depending on who you ask. Another thing that we noticed was that none of these resources really used the term calligraphy, and as we keep looking through, for example, the next one is Lessons in Roundhand by Baird from This is the Business Educator, which was a journal. That these strokes, well, the lesson is called Lessons in Roundhand, and Roundhand was the name of the script that they were writing in. And so here are the basic strokes that are used in this script, but you won't really see it being called calligraphy. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So here, this is Lessons in Roundhand, and again, the fundamental strokes of this script are explained over here on the right. And some of them, he names them the upper turn and lower turn, but you can see them here drawn out. Something else that I noticed is that these first few references that we've looked at have not used guide sheets, so there's no header line and no base line and no slant line like we use in our guide sheets now. But when you are practicing, it is definitely recommended to use guide sheets. You can see how the strokes are combined here to make words and letters. Also, this was kind of cool. People used to be able to submit their work, and then he would have criticisms and give feedback on how the person who submitted their work, what it looked like. Next is the Zinerian Manual. This is the 1924 edition. And in this book, this note here is referring to David Grimes. If you go to his website, he has a lot more resources. Most of these resources that I'm showing you right now, I actually found linked on his website. He is very big in the community of penmanship and preserving historical documents so that we can look at these amazing resources on the internet. But in this one, you can see it talks about how to make these strokes very specifically. These are just the shaded strokes, just the downstrokes. Then after you learn how to make these downstrokes, you learn how to combine them with the hairlines to create the fundamental strokes. And again here, these are just numbered. They're calling them number 1. This form is used in many letters. He's not giving this particular stroke a name. But again, it does go into detail in words about how to create these strokes. Something else that we wanted to talk about was the tools used. So before, this is the first example where I've seen what looks like a pointed pen with a steel nib. In these other lessons, the earlier ones, it is assumed that you're using a quill, which is like a feather that you cut to make it so that it's kind of like a pointed pen nib. And you dip it in ink and you write on the paper. There's so much history about how the terms like
copperplate and engrosser script and engraver script and roundhand, where all of those come from. So just a very brief overview. Back when they were using quills, you would dip the quill in ink, write on the paper, and then eventually the strokes were converted into printing plates by a master engraver, and the strokes were engraved on these printing plates that were made of copper, and that's where the word copperplate comes from. The next resource is more modern. This is Mastering Copperplate by Eleanor Winters, originally from 1989. I just want to show you here what's available on the Amazon preview. So here she has the copperplate alphabet written out. There are a few variations on some of the letters, like for example the B. There's a couple different ways to write it. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So she has 9 basic strokes written out. So far we've seen a variety of even the number of basic strokes that each of these calligraphers or scribes used in their approach to writing the letters. This screenshot is from Paul Antonio's book, which is Copperplate Script, a yin and yang approach from 2018. We got the chance to talk to Paul about this book. This is just a screenshot from one of the pages where he goes over the anatomy of the minuscules, and you can see there's way more than 6 or 8 or 12 strokes here. They're highlighted in red, and he names them very descriptively. And the reason he did this, he told us, was because he wanted to make sure that if someone was talking to him on the phone about their script, that he knew specifically which part of the letter they were referring to. So this is his approach to the copperplate script. And then finally, we have our Loveleigh loops method for the fundamental strokes, which we talked about in the beginning, where we have these 8 basic strokes, and these are based on how we approach the script. You might, in different videos that we have and different workbooks, we have a different number of scripts for, or a different number of fundamental strokes based on which script we're teaching. For example, in modern calligraphy, we added this reverse oval stroke because of the type of letter variations. You would see that, for example, in this lowercase b rather than the traditional copperplate way of writing the B, which usually uses a compound curve stroke. The other unique approach for us is that we don't teach the letters in alphabetical order. You might find that some calligraphers do alphabetical order and some don't. In some of these earlier books, they were grouping them by different strokes. You can see here these letters are grouped together, these letters are grouped together. So the way that different calligraphers group their letters is also unique as part of their approach. Here's just a screenshot from one of our pages that shows this group of letters that have these strokes in common, the entrance stroke and the ascending loop, and these are the letters in that lowercase group. So I hope this was interesting to you. If you like learning about the history of things, feel free to continue looking into some of these amazing resources. It's just so cool to go back and see. This is from 1813. That was a long time ago, and we're still using some of these lessons from these books today in learning modern calligraphy.
So I hope that looking at those historical examples was inspiring for you. And if you would like to learn calligraphy, our best advice for getting started is to really get comfortable with your fundamental strokes or your basic strokes. So if you'd like, you can download a free worksheet, this exact worksheet, which has all of the basic strokes with arrows and spots for you to trace and try it on your own. Also at the top, we just have some warm-ups to get you comfortable with doing your thick downstrokes and your thin upstrokes. We have arrows everywhere that you start your pen. And so you can get this worksheet for free in the link below. And then if you're still interested in practicing and learning calligraphy, we have a whole workbook that goes through the entire lowercase and uppercase alphabet. We also include a practice calendar that can get you through the whole workbook in 10 days. There's a ton of really great resources in the book. Here's one example of working through the letters in groups instead of in alphabetical order, we find that this is a really effective way to learn because you can just focus on these small pieces at a time. So for example, on this page, we have entrance stroke plus ascending stem loop, and this is how we've broken out this letter grouping. And this will help you not only gain confidence and improve your skills, but also really make your letters look consistent, which is a key to getting beautiful calligraphy. And we also have a fun practice tracker included for you in that workbook. So you can find that workbook link in the description below. And don't forget to go download this free worksheet so that you can practice your fundamental strokes. I hope this was inspiring and a great look into where these strokes came from and why we use them. And good luck with your practice. Keep at it, and thank you so much for watching.